Hey everyone, Stumpy Grump here. I've got installment number 6 ready to go for you. This one is going to be the chassis and the suspension. I've got everything set up. Let me spin the chair around and we'll get going on it. So on to the chassis and suspension we go. The first step in the process is to glue in the springs. So we'll dab a little glue in there. Simple process, so we will hit both sides. And drop in the springs. The next step, gluing the whole front suspension piece here on. You see we have locator pins. Makes things easy. And on the chassis, we have the holes for the pins to go into. Can't get any simpler than that. So we'll drop a little glue onto the springs. And so I'm not handling the parts with the glue. I like to put the glue actually on this chassis part here. Okay, that's plenty. And you just line up everything. Sometimes easier said than done. Get these two in first. Gonna have to hold it a bit. Which is no big deal. Sometimes you have to do that. Might even have to clamp it, which I think I will. I'll go ahead and carefully clamp those down. On both sides, and we'll let that sit for a few minutes. Now that I got the assembly here, the engine in, the upper A-arms on, one thing I noticed that I had to redo is those holes that I showed you, those locating holes right here and here. Oh, it's good. Right there, there, and there. You're going to want to widen those out. With the amount of paint that I used, both on the suspension piece and on the chassis piece, I ended up having to widen them out. So, just a little heads up, if you're doing this kit, or any other kit that has those locating holes like that, test fit them, make sure they go all the way in, and you might have to widen them out a little bit. Alright guys, so we'll pick this back up with the suspension and everything already done and the interior glued onto your chassis piece as well. I left off the radiator assembly so I can show you some things a little bit closer on here. Remember when I told you about drilling the holes, making them a little bit wider for your locator pins. Also for your upper A-arms, when you put them on, test fit this chassis piece onto the interior piece here with your inner fender wells to make sure that the upper A-arms fit inside that little gap there. Mine didn't at first, so I had to redo everything like a dummy because it has to fit flush right there and on the other side. So just make sure your upper A-arm here is inside that little gap, like so. But after installing your front suspension and all that, and your engine and transmission, the next step is the exhaust. The exhaust has locator holes and locator pins that fits perfectly. They line up perfectly with the shorty headers, so that's excellent. I did not glue these in right here at the end because I'm going to do a little bit something different with the exhaust. I'm probably going to chop it off and add on some 3/16 styrene tubing for bigger pipes coming out. So when I do that, I'll probably end up ungluing it anyway, so I'll wait till I get those on and then I'll glue that in, and that'll hold right there. Go on to the rear end assembly. You have your little raised blocks right here, just real thin ones that they supply in the kit, rather than the thicker blocks to raise the rear end up more, and you have shorter springs. There's locator pins and locator holes on the springs and on the chassis here and on the suspension piece. Everything just fits right in perfectly. Once again, you might want to pre-drill with a little bit bigger bit and open those up a little bit. So that fits perfectly, and you hook it up with your drive shaft. You got your little trailing arm or whatever that is piece right here that goes to the rear end. And the shocks. Shocks fit right in, as well as this anti-roll bar here, whatever that is. So that all fits really, really good. And then you just glue your interior piece on and make sure that it fits snug up here in the front. And that's it for the chassis and interior. Like I said, I do have my radiator support, radiator and shroud, and the battery on there. It just fits right on there like so. I haven't put that on yet. That and the hoses is all I got to do there. One thing I do have to do though is I either didn't get them or I lost them one of the 3 or 4 times I got into this kit for various reasons, is I don't have the little steel pins that go from the wheel backs into there. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to drill out these holes a little bit wider. Thankfully in this kit that's designed that way. I'm going to drill those out a little bit wider and drill out my wheel back holes a little bit wider. And I'm going to use some 1/8 inch styrene tubing as my wheel pins, rather than, like, you can use a toothpick. You can even use a skinnier piece of the sprue if there's a skinny piece of sprue. I don't really think there is on this one. You can use styrene rod, aluminum rod, whatever you want to use. But somehow I either didn't get them or I lost them, but I don't have them. So I'm just going to drill them out a little bit wider, and I'm going to use the styrene tubing for that. So we'll see how that works. I'll be right back. Okay, so I found the right size drill bit. And with my pin vise, very slowly and very carefully, drilled holes into all 4 wheel hubs and onto the wheel backs that I'll be using. So the 1/8 inch styrene tubing fits right in. Crisis averted there. Up next, I will do the wheel assembly, including I've already pre-drilled the holes for the valve stems. So we are at the valve stem process. I do have the tutorial on my channel on how to do valve stems, the same concept as doing the door locks. You drill a hole where you want the stem to go. I take my piece of copper wire, I slide it into the hole, get it the length I want it, hold it in place. I'll dab some Instacure on it here. And snip it off with my sprue cutters. Dries pretty quickly. And the final step is just applying your chrome or black paint of choice. These are going to be chrome valve stems. My choice is my new Vallejo metal color chrome that I got. Normally I use the Molitor, but it's a pretty good place to use this. And I do that to all four. And that's that. The next step, or along with that step, is I sand down the tread on my tires. For that, I use my rotary tool here with this attachment. I've got 3 speeds. I just use the second speed and just spin the tire on my finger as I do that. Get it as even as possible, and then I get a little bit along the sides there to finish it off as I shoot the tire off my finger. That happens once in a while. But yeah, you don't need it high, just on 2. I use 2. There's 3, and there you go. You just do that all around and you have your worn tire. And I just take my completed rim here, and in this case, how these assemble together. You just pop them on. There's your wheel and tire with your valve stem. I dabbed just a little bit of Taniya black pen line accent color inside the lug nuts to detail those out a little bit. Then you put on your wheel backs and it's all set to go on the car. Right, so now I have my 4 pieces of styrene tubing that I use as my axles, I guess you could say. And I'll just glue them into the back of the wheel assembly here. Just put the glue on there. And fit it in. And there it will slide into your drilled out hole. There you have it. What I am going to do is I'm going to take it back out. That's how you do that. I am going to do that last. I'm going to glue all the axles in. I'm going to paint them to match the wheel backs there in my galvanized tin, steel color. And I'm going to put the wheels on basically last after I get the body on. I wait till I get the body all done and the body on, and then I put the wheels on most of the time, because that helps you really see, if all, pay no attention to the bouncing camera, that makes you see when all four tires will connect to the surface, sit on the surface. You don't have them a little three-wheel stance here. You might have to adjust on things, even with the metal axles and stuff. You still might have to adjust on things a little bit to get the car to sit on all four tires. So I usually do that at the end, so I'm not monkeying and messing with this thing once I get the body and everything on. You know, put your finger through the windshield, knock the windshield out, you have to take everything back apart. So I just do all that last. That way you can kind of adjust how your wheel sits a little bit to get them to sit flush there. So I'm going to go ahead and glue on my radiator and radiator support. You can see where the glue points are going to be. Right there, I gotta get that mounting point just so on both sides. And there you go. And if you want to, sometimes I do, just for extra safe measure, get it to where everybody can see it here, I dab some my extra thin cement in there. And just hold it for a few seconds. And there it is. So now that the radiator is in, it is time for all the hose connections, the heater hoses and the upper and lower radiator hoses. The toughest one first, and that is the lower radiator hose. I may not be able to do this on camera because these are always tough to do, no matter how well designed the kit is. So I'm going to probably end up doing this off camera. So I'll be back when it's on. Alrighty, so thankfully this one went on without much of an issue. I use 2 tweezers. I dabbed glue on the water pump part and the radiator part there. And then I took the hose, ran it underneath the suspension part here. I can get you where you see it. And I just used my other pair of tweezers to connect it to the radiator, and then my main tweezers to connect it to the water pump. And well-designed kit, that actually went on about as smooth as I've ever put on a lower radiator hose. So kudos to Revell for that. Very well designed. Fit perfect. Now we'll flip it over and we'll do everything else. I'm going to go ahead and do the heater hoses first, and then the radiator hose. So whichever way I'm going to manage to get this done. I'm working on a fairly limited area here for my camera, so sorry if you miss anything. First thing you want to do is you want to measure out how much hose you're actually going to need. So you don't want to cut too much off, but you don't want to cut it too short either. So I'm going to go right there. So there's one. You know, there's most likely an easier way to do this. This is just how I do it. Sometimes I take the long way around to the candy store, you know what I mean? Or in this case, the hobby shop. Once again, running along there. I'll actually take a pair of scissors this time. And snip it right there. So you just take your, whoops, too much. Your glue on your toothpick. And insert it into the holes there. And away you go. I cannot stress, guys, how hard this is to do working around the camera. Being half blind and needing to have your face real close to the subject. So we'll let those dry before we run them any further because we don't want to pull them out. Okay, so I got the first hose measured up. You know, we'll run the glue once again into the hole I drilled in the intake. Use my better tweezers here. Try to get the right angle. There we go. There's one heater hose. There it is. Both of those hoses are now in. You can see down here where the lower radiator hose connects to the water pump. And now it's time for the upper radiator hose. And there it sits. I am just going to glue it as is rather than try to do that again. Once again, you can take some bare metal foil or whatever and keep these hoses together up against the fender well, but I'm going to leave them like that. Sometimes they're not together and stuff. I'll probably glue them together right there where they touch, but I'm going to leave them. So there's your heater hoses and radiator hoses. Again, upside down for the lower hose. So that will end the chassis and suspension part of the program. Again, the steps that you use on these is up to you. You don't necessarily have to follow my steps the way I do things. On this particular kit with the firewall going and the radiator going in before the body goes on, I figure that's the best time to do the hoses. You could wait until you get the body on before you do it. Then you risk the firewall there being up underneath, maybe where you can't reach or see very well. So again, your choice. A lot of these, the interior tub actually, especially the AMTs and MPCs, the interior tub glues up underneath the body, and then the chassis then goes on last. But in this, the interior and the chassis, a lot of the newer, more modern Revell releases, at least, the chassis and the interior get glued together with fender wells and everything. So you can do all that all at once. Pretty slick. So that's that part of the process. Stay tuned for the next step. Thanks for watching Stumping Grump Scale Speed Shop. I'll catch you next time.